Well, I think over the long run it is to the benefit of these oil states, because their people would learn actually to work and produce things, because now what they largely do is sit there and let foreign workers pump the oil. They have extraordinarily generous systems. They have a lot of frustrated young men who don't have jobs. And part of that is because of the nature of oil. If they had broad-based economies where people were engaged in manufacturing and services, they could evolve, I think, towards something different than the autocracies that we see now. I tell some of my Saudi acquaintances that they have a very substantial gross domestic product per capita, absolutely, but they have a neighbor that has a 25 or 30% bigger GDP per capita and doesn't have a drop of oil. Its name is Israel, because Israelis actually have jobs. They have universities that teach things like computer science instead of just reciting religious documents. They have, you know, their women are educated. All of those changes in time may come to these oil states, but they're not going to come without our taking the lead in moving the world away from oil.
So you actually think that U.S. moves to be energy independent can actually help spread democracy to these nations?
It's not just energy independent. It's breaking oil's monopoly over transportation. And if we just replaced foreign oil and stopped, things would eventually slip back into chaos, because they have the low-cost production. And we can't beat low-cost production of oil with high-cost production of oil in this country. We've got to take the lead in getting ways to transport ourselves without using oil, period. We need to do what my friend Annie Coren calls turn oil into salt. At the end of the 19th century, salt was a strategic commodity, only way to preserve meat, hugely important. Countries went to war over salt mines in the late 19th century and in Latin America. But the coming of the electricity grid and the idea of refrigeration and freezing not only was cheaper than salt, soaking meat in salt brine, but the meat tasted a lot better after it had been frozen and thawed. And so salt, within a relatively few years, just took a nosedive as a strategic commodity. Now, we still use salt. It tastes fine on corn on the cob. We need it on the sidewalks in Washington in February, et cetera, et cetera. But nobody goes to war over salt mines anymore. We need to do that to oil. We need to make oil boring. Need to make people yawn when they hear the word oil.
Let me just go back for 1 second. Could you give me a laundry list of the countries that you're talking about?
Well, I'm talking about virtually all of the Persian Gulf. I'm talking about Venezuela. I'm talking about Russia. Those countries together, Russia's not part of OPEC, but OPEC is essentially the Persian Gulf plus one or two other countries in Africa and Latin America. And they are who controls the oil market today, led by Saudi Arabia, because Saudi production is so low cost, and as far as we know now, they still have substantial reserves. There's a debate about that, whether or not oil is peaked in Saudi Arabian fields or not, but for the time being anyway, they have substantial reserves anyway, and they have very low costs to lift oil. They can lift oil for a very few dollars a barrel, $3, $4, $5 a barrel in Saudi Arabia, and it costs us tens of dollars a barrel to lift it in the United States. Whether we're drilling in Alaska or under the Gulf of Mexico or whatever, it's still tens of dollars a barrel, and you can't beat a few dollars a barrel cost and outcompete them in an international market by producing at tens of dollars a barrel. You just can't do it. So we've got to break oil, not just imports. We've got to break oil.
If the U.S. makes the right steps, what could the U.S. president say to Hugo Chavez?
Have a nice day.